The story of the Tower of Babel is one of the most mysterious and thought-provoking accounts in the Bible. Though told in only a few short verses in Genesis, it has stirred countless questions across generations. Why did humanity come together to build this tower, and what did they hope to achieve? Why did God intervene in such a unique way, not with fire or flood, but with language? And what does this story reveal about human pride, ambition, and the longing for unity that still shapes us today? This story is more than ancient history. It is a timeless mirror that reflects the condition of the human heart. Even though thousands of years have passed since the plains of Shinar echoed with the sound of bricks and mortar, the same questions remain. Are we using our unity and creativity to honor God, or are we still trying to build towers that reach heaven on our own terms? The relevance of this account continues to challenge us in the modern world, where human progress often walks hand in hand with pride. At its core, the Tower of Babel is not just about a building, but about the desires within people. It speaks of a deep longing for permanence, recognition, and greatness. Humanity has always wanted to make a name for itself, to leave behind something lasting. Yet the story asks us to reflect. What kind of name do we truly seek? One carved by our own hands, or one given by God Himself? The narrative also touches on themes of unity and division. Before the tower, humanity shared one language, one vision, one purpose. That unity gave them incredible strength, but it also carried hidden danger. When human unity is not guided by God, it can turn into rebellion rather than blessing. Babel reminds us that unity by itself is not enough. It must be rooted in truth, humility, and obedience to the Creator. This is why the Tower of Babel continues to resonate so deeply. It shows us both the beauty and the danger of human ambition. It warns against pride, but it also points toward the hope of true unity, the kind that comes not from human effort, but from God's Spirit. In exploring this story, we uncover lessons that reach across time, shaping the way we see ourselves, our world, and our relationship with the divine. If you enjoy this kind of content, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps spread these messages to more people and builds a community where faith and wisdom can grow together. When the floodwaters receded and Noah and his family stepped onto dry ground, the world they encountered was unlike the one that had existed before. The earth had been washed clean, not only of people, but of the wickedness that had corrupted nearly every heart. What remained was a new beginning, a chance for humanity to start afresh under God's guidance. The air carried the stillness of renewal, and the soil, though damp and scarred by the weight of the waters, was ready to be tilled and cultivated once again. It was a moment heavy with promise, yet equally heavy with responsibility. Noah's family became the roots from which the branches of humanity would grow once more. His sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, along with their wives, carried within them the seeds of nations to come. Every tribe, every language, and every people that would one day walk the earth traced their lineage back to this single family, preserved by divine grace. In that reality lay both unity and fragility, for while they shared the same blood and the same memories of the flood, they also carried the same human nature that had once led to destruction. The world after the flood demanded careful stewardship. The rainbow stretched across the sky as a sign of covenant, a divine reminder that the waters would never again cover the earth in judgment. This covenant offered reassurance, but it also reminded humanity of their place before God. Life was to be cherished, creation respected, and human pride restrained. Yet as generations passed, memory of the flood became a story told rather than an experience lived. And with that fading memory, the weight of its warning grew lighter in the hearts of Noah's descendants. Still, the family of Noah began to grow, multiplying and spreading across the land. Villages turned into settlements, and settlements into towns. People carried with them not only their bloodline, but also a longing for community, safety, and identity. They desired permanence, for the flood had shown them the fragility of life. They wanted more than survival. They wanted legacy. This desire was natural, but it would also become the seed of future conflict. For the line between seeking security and seeking greatness is often thin. Despite the trauma of the flood, humanity still carried within its heart the drive to be united. The world felt vast and uncharted, yet the descendants of Noah chose to remain close together rather than spread widely. They wanted to hold on to one another, to maintain strength in numbers, to face the uncertainties of the new earth as one people. It was this choice to cling to unity, rather than to fulfill the divine instruction to fill the earth, that set the stage for what would later unfold in Shinar. The unity of Noah's family was beautiful in one sense, for it spoke of loyalty and togetherness, but it also carried the shadow of defiance. The Creator had blessed them with the command to be fruitful, to multiply, and to fill the earth. That blessing was meant to extend the human family across all lands, allowing them to experience the breadth of creation. Yet the fear of being scattered, of losing one another, caused humanity to resist this calling. What began as a desire for protection slowly became resistance to divine purpose. The land of Shinar eventually became the gathering place of this post-flood people. Fertile plains stretched across the horizon, offering both resources and space for settlement. Here, humanity found what they believed to be the perfect environment for building something lasting. But this choice, though practical on the surface, carried deeper implications. The desire to stay united in one place, to anchor their existence in one land, was not only about safety. It was about creating a legacy independent of divine direction. The flood had reminded humanity that their lives were fragile, that their power was limited, and that judgment could fall swiftly upon rebellion. Yet even in this fresh start, the same tendency towards self-reliance began to rise again. The people of Shinar wanted to control their destiny, to ensure that never again would they be left vulnerable to forces greater than themselves. It was this mindset that paved the way for Babel, a city not merely of stone and clay, but of ambition and human determination. As humanity multiplied and settled in the plain of Shinar, one of their greatest strengths was the fact that they all shared one language. Every person, regardless of family line or background, could understand the words of their neighbor. Communication was seamless, ideas flowed freely, and cooperation was effortless. This unity of speech was more than convenience, it was power. It allowed them to dream together, to plan together, and to act as a single body with a single purpose. The beauty of one voice resounded in the air as plans for life took shape. Families could share knowledge, pass down traditions, and weave their hopes into the common fabric of society. Songs and stories carried meaning across every hearth, binding the people together in a shared identity. It must have felt as if nothing could stand in their way, for with one voice they could agree, and with one vision they could build. Such unity is rare, and in its purest form it can create peace, cooperation, and great achievements. Yet unity without direction from God carries hidden dangers. When people become too confident in their collective strength, they risk forgetting that their true foundation rests not in their own efforts, but in divine guidance. The descendants of Noah stood at a crossroads, for the same unity that allowed them to build community could also lead them down a path of rebellion. Shared language was a gift, but like all gifts, it could be used for good or twisted towards self-glorification. The people in Shinar began to look at their unity as proof of their own sufficiency. They believed that with one voice, they could accomplish anything, even things that reached beyond the boundaries set by God. The harmony that should have inspired gratitude and humility instead became a source of pride. The more they agreed with one another, the less they sought guidance from above. It is often the case that when human voices grow louder, the divine voice is pushed into the background. As they discussed their future, the thought began to emerge that they could build a city unlike any before it. A city that would not simply house their families, but would stand as a monument to their greatness. In their minds, this was more than protection. It was permanence. They wanted to be remembered, to make a name for themselves, and to ensure that no force, whether flood or dispersion, would erase them from history. One voice became one vision, and one vision turned into ambition. The unity of speech gave rise to remarkable creativity. With ease, they could plan the construction of buildings, the organization of society, and the coordination of labor. They discovered that when minds and hands worked together without barrier, progress seemed limitless. Yet beneath this unity, something subtle was changing. What began as the natural desire for safety was slowly becoming the pursuit of control. The city they dreamed of was not just for survival, it was for glory. At first glance, the image of a people moving together in harmony seems admirable. But when that harmony becomes a substitute for obedience to God, it can lead to destruction. Humanity's voice had become one, but it was no longer tuned to the voice of heaven. The city of one language was a marvel of cooperation, but it was also a seed of rebellion. For what good is one voice if it speaks against the will of the one who gave it? The plain of Shinar was filled with the sound of a people united, their conversations blending into a single current of determination. Yet as their vision grew larger, their dependence on God grew smaller. The stage was set for an act of ambition that would shape the course of human history. The city of one voice would soon give birth to the tower that became the symbol of pride. The decision to build was not made lightly, nor was it an ordinary project. The people of Shinar looked to the future with determination and chose to create a city and a tower that would rise higher than anything seen before. But in order to bring this vision into reality, they needed more than unity of language. They needed innovation, a technology that could transform clay and straw into something stronger, something enduring. That innovation came in the form of bricks. Bricks represented more than simple building material. Unlike stones, which are shaped by nature, bricks are crafted by human hands. They are uniform, predictable, and easily multiplied. In choosing bricks, the people of Shinar revealed something about their mindset. They were not content to use what creation offered. They sought to shape and control their environment, to bend nature to their will. Bricks became the symbol of human ingenuity, but also of human ambition. The labor of molding clay, drying it in the sun, and firing it in kilns filled the plain with industry. Smoke from the fires rose to the sky as thousands of bricks were formed. Each one carried the fingerprints of human effort, the imprint of determination to build something lasting. Tar served as mortar, binding the bricks together into walls that grew taller by the day. The sound of work echoed through the land, the rhythm of hammers and shovels keeping time with the heartbeat of ambition. As the tower began to rise, it became more than a structure. It became a statement. The people of Shinar were declaring to the world, and perhaps to heaven itself, that they would not be forgotten. "Let us make a name for ourselves," they said, words that carried both longing and defiance. In their desire for recognition, they sought to leave behind a monument that no floodwaters could wash away. The tower was meant to stand as proof of their greatness, as assurance that their unity could achieve the impossible. The symbolism of reaching to the heavens was not lost on them. Whether or not they truly believed they could touch the sky, the act of building upward reflected their desire to bridge the gap between earth and heaven on their own terms. It was as if they were saying that they no longer needed divine favor, that their hands and their bricks could elevate them high enough. Pride was cemented into every layer, ambition baked into every brick. The city and the tower promised protection as well. By gathering in one place, by building a fortress of bricks, the people believed they could resist the forces that might otherwise scatter them. They feared dispersion, the breaking of their unity, and the loss of their identity. The tower was not only a monument to pride, it was also a wall against obedience. In their striving to hold on to one another, they resisted the divine command to spread across the earth. Bricks, ambition, and unity combined to create a vision that was unstoppable from a human perspective. No force of nature, no division of will, and no lack of resources seemed capable of halting their progress. The tower climbed higher, stone by stone, brick by brick, an earthly staircase that reached toward heaven. To human eyes it was magnificent, but to the eyes of heaven it revealed a heart of rebellion. Every brick lifted was a choice, every wall raised was a declaration. Humanity was not merely building a city, it was building a legacy rooted in pride. The plain of Shinar became a monument to human strength, but it also became a stage where the limits of that strength would be tested. For no tower, no matter how high, can stand if it is not grounded in the will of God. The words spoken among the builders reveal the true heart of the project. Let us make a name for ourselves. In those words lies the essence of human pride. To make a name is to seek recognition, to carve an identity independent of God. It is not the desire for survival that drives such ambition, but the thirst for glory. The Tower of Babel was not simply a construction of brick and mortar. It was a challenge to heaven itself, an attempt to secure greatness apart from the Creator. Pride is subtle, yet powerful. It begins with the simple desire to be remembered, to establish significance. But when left unchecked, it grows into rebellion against the one whose name is above all names. The builders of Babel no longer sought to honor God, they sought to replace him as the source of their security and identity. Their unity, their strength, their achievements, all were turned inward, directed toward the exaltation of themselves rather than the glory of the divine. The phrase, "lest we be scattered," uncovers another layer of their motive. Their fear of dispersion was not only about losing one another, it was about losing control. To spread across the earth would mean to trust God's plan, to live in dependence on his provision. But the builders of Babel wanted to take destiny into their own hands. They wanted to resist scattering by creating a center that no force could break apart. In doing so, they were saying that they would define their future, not God. This act of collective pride was unlike anything seen before. Individuals had rebelled against God in the past, but now humanity united as one voice in a single act of defiance. This was not the rebellion of a single king or nation, it was the rebellion of mankind itself. The tower rose not only as a monument, but as a declaration that humanity would stand together against heaven, that they would craft their own path upward without bowing to divine authority. The builders sought to climb higher, but in reality they were falling lower. Every brick placed upon another was a step further from humility, further from obedience, further from the relationship that bound humanity to God. Pride always disguises itself as progress, but in truth it is a descent. The higher the tower reached, the further the people drifted from the purpose for which they were created. What made this moment so dangerous was not only the pride of individuals, but the collective power of pride when shared by many. One heart lifted in arrogance can cause harm, but an entire people united in arrogance can shift the course of history. The tower was not only a building, it was a symbol of what humanity could achieve when united without God. That symbol carried within it the seeds of destruction, for pride left unchecked leads only to ruin. By seeking to make a name for themselves, the people of Shinar overlooked the truth that every name not rooted in God eventually fades. Monuments crumble, towers fall, and legacies vanish. Only the name given by the Creator endures. The builders believed their city and tower would guarantee their place in history, but in striving to secure permanence, they guaranteed only judgment. The challenge to heaven was not a battle of weapons, but of wills. Humanity lifted its will against the will of God, believing that collective strength could replace divine authority. It was not simply a city being built, it was a throne of pride being raised. And in this challenge, humanity would soon learn that no tower, no unity, and no ambition can stand against the purpose of heaven. The tower rose steadily into the sky, a monument of human pride that seemed unstoppable to those who built it. From their perspective, progress was unshakable, and destiny was in their hands. Yet while they worked tirelessly to elevate themselves, heaven observed the unfolding scene with clarity. The text tells us that God came down to see the city and the tower. These words are rich with meaning, not because God needed to move from one place to another in order to see, but because they describe a divine decision to act directly within human history. The phrase "God came down" carries profound weight. It speaks of a creator who is not distant, not indifferent, but intimately involved with the affairs of men. He did not leave humanity to wander unchecked into the depths of pride. He descended not because his vision was limited, but to emphasize his readiness to engage and to confront the challenge that humanity had raised against him. This act revealed both his authority and his care, for divine intervention often arises not only from judgment, but from mercy. To those building the tower, it may have appeared that nothing could restrain them. Their hands were skilled, their minds sharp, and their voices united. Yet the descent of God revealed a truth that no human ambition can erase. Every action of mankind lies under divine observation. No wall is high enough, no tower tall enough to escape the gaze of heaven. Human pride may grow bold, but it remains powerless when measured against the sovereignty of God. By coming down, God was also communicating something to humanity. The tower represented an attempt to rise upward on human terms, as though greatness could be seized by bricks and mortar. But God's descent showed that access to heaven does not come through the work of human hands. It comes only by his initiative. Humanity cannot climb to God. God must come down to humanity. This truth would echo throughout history in many ways, pointing ultimately to the times when God would step directly into human existence to reveal himself. The seriousness of the moment cannot be overstated. God's descent marked a turning point for all nations. The tower was more than a building. It was a symbol of rebellion that could not be left unchecked. If left alone, the people would only grow deeper in arrogance, mistaking their unity for independence from the Creator. God saw not only what they were doing, but what it would lead to if allowed to continue. Intervention was not just about the present moment, it was about the future of humanity. In his descent, God displayed patience as well as power. He could have destroyed the tower instantly with fire, earthquake, or flood. He could have scattered the builders with force, but he chose a path that revealed wisdom as much as judgment. By addressing the root of their unity, he would dissolve their pride without erasing their existence. His intervention would humble them while still preserving them, reminding humanity of their dependence on him without destroying the very people he had created. The coming down of God teaches a timeless lesson. Human efforts to rise in defiance may seem great for a season, but heaven always has the final word. The might of nations, the height of towers, and the unity of human voices are small before the one who rules all things. God's descent showed that no rebellion is hidden, no ambition too lofty to escape his attention. Humanity had lifted its will against heaven, But heaven's response was not delayed. The scene of God descending to the tower remains one of the most striking images in Scripture. It reveals a God who does not watch passively as his creation drifts into ruin, but steps down to engage, to act, and to guide history back toward his purposes. While the people of Shinar sought to climb upward, God stooped downward, and in that motion lies both judgment and grace. When God descended to observe the tower, he saw the strength of human unity, but he also recognized its danger. Left unchecked, this unity would only deepen rebellion and magnify pride. In his wisdom, he chose a way to break their power without destroying their lives. The solution came in the form of language. With a single act, God altered the foundation of their unity by confusing their speech. Suddenly, what had once been effortless communication became a source of confusion and frustration. The experience must have been startling beyond words. One moment, builders were shouting instructions to one another as walls rose and bricks were laid. The next moment, their words no longer carried meaning. A mason might ask for mortar, but the worker beside him would hear only unfamiliar sounds. A supervisor might command laborers to lift beams, but his voice became incomprehensible noise. What had been seamless cooperation dissolved into chaos. Confusion spread quickly across the plain of Shinar. Misunderstandings turned into arguments into division. People who had once worked side by side now looked at one another with bewilderment. Neighbors became strangers, friends became foreigners. It was not war or violence that disrupted their unity, but the loss of shared speech. Something so simple, yet so essential, had been taken from them, and without it, their grand project could no longer continue. The confusion of tongues humbled humanity in a profound way. It showed that their unity, though powerful, was fragile. Their plans depended not only on strength of hand and brilliance of mind, but also on the ability to communicate. By striking at this foundation, God reminded them that every human endeavor rests upon gifts given by Him. Language, which had been taken for granted, was revealed as a divine tool that could be withdrawn or reshaped at any moment. For the builders, the confusion must have been painful. They had invested time, energy, and hope into a project that now stood unfinished. The tower, once rising with promise, now loomed as a monument to frustration. Each group of workers drifted toward those they could understand, forming clusters of shared speech. The bonds that had tied humanity together unraveled as languages multiplied across the plain. Though the scattering of speech felt like judgment, it was also mercy. By dividing their tongues, God prevented greater evil from taking root. Had humanity remained united in rebellion, their pride would only have grown, and their distance from God would have deepened. Confusion became a restraint, a way of slowing humanity's descent into arrogance. It was a disruption, but it was also a protection. The sudden diversity of languages marked a turning point in history. What began as one voice became many, and from those voices would eventually come the rich tapestry of cultures, nations, and civilizations across the earth. The confusion that began as an obstacle would, in time, serve a greater purpose. For within diversity lay the seeds of God's plan to fill the world with nations, each carrying its own place in the unfolding story of humanity. The tower no longer rose into the sky, but its unfinished stones bore witness to the moment when speech itself became a tool of divine wisdom. From that day forward, humanity would never again be united under one voice apart from God. The confusion of tongues became both a humbling reminder and a guiding hand, turning humanity away from arrogance and toward the path of dependence on the Creator. With their speech confused, the builders of Babel had no choice but to separate. Groups of people who could still understand one another gathered together, leaving behind those who spoke in unfamiliar sounds. This natural division gave rise to the scattering that followed. The great project of unity dissolved, and humanity began to spread out across the face of the earth, moving into new lands, seeking places where they could survive and thrive. The scattering was more than a practical necessity. It was the fulfillment of God's original command. From the beginning, he had told Noah's descendants to multiply and fill the earth. The fear of dispersion had driven humanity to build the tower, but God's intervention ensured that his purpose would stand. What they resisted in pride, he accomplished in wisdom. By scattering them, God was not abandoning humanity, but guiding them into the design he had spoken from the start. As groups migrated outward, they carried with them fragments of memory. They remembered the flood, the city of Shinar, and the tower that stood unfinished. They remembered the day when voices turned strange and neighbors became foreigners. These memories traveled with them into new lands, shaping their stories, myths, and traditions. Across cultures, echoes of a great tower and a scattering of peoples can still be found, testifying to the deep imprint of this event on the human story. The scattering gave rise to nations. As languages multiplied, so did identities. Shared speech created bonds of community, and those bonds laid the foundations of tribes, clans, and cultures. From the plain of Shinar, humanity began to branch outward like the spreading of a great tree, each branch distinct, yet all connected to the same root. Diversity was born, and with it came both beauty and challenge. Geography played its part as well. Some groups journeyed to fertile valleys, others to mountains or deserts. Over time, they adapted to their environments, shaping unique customs, ways of life, and traditions. What began as confusion grew into the vast diversity of human existence. Different languages, different nations, and different cultures emerged, each reflecting a piece of the grand design. Though scattered, humanity was still under the watchful hand of the Creator, who guides the unfolding of history. The scattering also became a safeguard. By dispersing humanity across the earth, God limited the scope of collective rebellion. Pride, though still present in every heart, could no longer unite the whole human race in one defiant voice. Nations might rise and fall, but none could replicate the absolute unity of Babel apart from divine permission. This division preserved humanity from the dangers of unrestrained pride, even as it set the stage for the unfolding story of redemption. For those who left Shinar, the journey must have been filled with uncertainty. They had dreamed of permanence, yet they found themselves scattered into unfamiliar lands. Still, God's providence was at work. The scattering was not abandonment, but a redirection, not punishment alone, but also preparation. In spreading across the world, humanity would unknowingly pave the way for the unfolding of God's plan, a plan that would one day bring all nations back together under his reign. The Tower of Babel stood incomplete, but its legacy lived on in the nations that spread from its shadow. What seemed like division was also destiny. From this scattering would come the nations that fill the earth today, each carrying its own language, its own culture, and its own place in the tapestry of history. The story of Babel is not simply about a tower or a city. It is about the condition of the human heart and the lessons that emerge when pride collides with divine purpose. Pride drove humanity to build upward, to make a name for themselves, to resist the scattering that God had ordained. Unity gave them the strength to achieve what seemed impossible. But together, pride and unity without God led only to downfall. These lessons remain as relevant now as they were in the days of Shinar. The first lesson is that pride blinds the human heart. The builders of Babel believed that their unity made them unstoppable, but in truth it made them vulnerable. By trusting in themselves rather than in God, they built a foundation destined to crumble. Pride convinces people that they are secure when they are not, that their achievements will last forever when they will not. It was pride that lifted the tower brick by brick, but it was also pride that ensured it would remain unfinished. The second lesson is that unity, though powerful, must be rooted in truth. When people come together for good, unity can bring healing, growth, and blessing. But when unity is directed toward rebellion, it multiplies destruction. The builders of Babel used their unity to defy God, to resist his plan, and to exalt themselves. Their example warns that unity is not always virtuous. What matters is the purpose behind it. 1,000 voices can speak as one, but if they speak against God, they speak in vain. Another lesson lies in the scattering of languages. Though it may have felt like judgment, it also revealed the wisdom of God. By confusing their tongues, he prevented greater corruption. The scattering became a safeguard against humanity's self-destruction. This teaches us that what may seem like loss or disruption can actually be a form of protection. Sometimes God breaks apart what we try to build, not to harm us, but to save us from paths that would lead to ruin. The story also speaks to the fragility of human achievement. Towers rise, empires expand, nations flourish, but all crumble when built on pride. Babel stands as a symbol of the futility of human ambition apart from God. No matter how advanced our tools, no matter how brilliant our designs, everything built for self-glory fades. Only what is rooted in God endures. The unfinished tower is a reminder that human greatness, when divorced from divine purpose, is always temporary. Perhaps the deepest lesson is the contrast between making a name for ourselves and receiving a name from God. The builders of Babel longed to be remembered, to secure their legacy through human effort. Yet history records them not for greatness, but for failure. True greatness comes not from self-exaltation, but from walking humbly with God. The names that endure are those written by Him, not those carved by human ambition. These lessons extend beyond the ancient plains of Shinar. They echo into every age, including our own. Pride still tempts humanity to trust in its own strength, to build towers of technology, wealth, or power as monuments to independence. Unity still carries both potential for good and danger for evil. The story of Babel asks us to examine not only our achievements, but the motives behind them. Are we building for God's glory or for our own? The tower may be ancient, but its message is timeless. Pride divides, unity misused destroys, and ambition without God leaves only ruins. Yet humility, obedience, and true unity rooted in God create foundations that last forever. Babel teaches us not to fear ambition, but to direct it rightly, to aim our efforts not at exalting ourselves, but at glorifying the one who gave us life. The Tower of Babel stands as one of the earliest stories of division, a moment when humanity's unity collapsed under the weight of pride. Many centuries later, another moment involving language took place in Jerusalem, but this time it carried the opposite meaning. At Babel, God scattered people by multiplying languages. At Pentecost, God gathered people by allowing the gospel to be heard across languages. These two moments stand like mirrors of one another, one reflecting the consequence of pride, the other reflecting the gift of redemption. When the Holy Spirit descended upon the disciples gathered in Jerusalem, something extraordinary happened. People from many lands, speaking many different tongues, heard the message of Christ in their own language. Confusion was replaced by clarity. Division was replaced by understanding. Where once language had scattered nations, now language became the means by which nations were drawn together. What Babel broke apart, Pentecost began to heal. The contrast is striking. At Babel, humanity sought to rise toward heaven by their own strength, building a tower of bricks. At Pentecost, heaven descended to humanity in the form of the Spirit, filling frail men and women with power not of their own making. At Babel, human ambition attempted to reach upward. At Pentecost, divine grace came downward. The difference reveals a profound truth. Reconciliation with God does not come from human effort, but from God's initiative. Language lies at the heart of both stories. At Babel, it became a barrier that separated people into nations. At Pentecost, it became a bridge that carried the message of salvation across barriers. The same tool that God once used to humble humanity became, by His Spirit, a tool to unify humanity under Christ. It reminds us that nothing in creation is beyond His power to redeem. What once caused confusion can, in His hands, become the very channel of understanding. The people gathered in Jerusalem were astonished as they heard the disciples speak. Some mocked, thinking the disciples were speaking nonsense, but others recognized that something divine was taking place. The Spirit gave utterance, and suddenly the message of Christ reached hearts that otherwise would have remained closed. This moment was not only about miraculous speech, it was about the breaking down of walls. The nations, once divided, were now being called into one body under the name of Jesus. The reversal of Babel at Pentecost shows that God's purpose was never simply to scatter. His scattering had been necessary to restrain pride, but His plan always moved toward gathering, toward bringing nations back into unity, not unity built on human ambition, but unity built on His Spirit. Pentecost revealed the heart of God, a desire for the nations to be united once again, this time in truth and love rather than in rebellion. This connection between Babel and Pentecost teaches us something vital about unity. True unity cannot be manufactured by human strength. No tower, no empire, no human achievement can produce it. True unity comes only when the Spirit of God binds hearts together. It is not about one language, but about one message, the message of salvation through Christ. It is not about bricks and mortar, but about faith and obedience. Pentecost stands as a divine answer to Babel, showing that what pride destroyed, grace restores. Humanity's attempt to rise upward ended in scattering, but God's descent through His Spirit brought gathering. The unfinished tower in Shinar remains a symbol of human futility, but the tongues of fire in Jerusalem shine as a symbol of divine possibility. Where Babel left division, Pentecost brought hope, and that hope continues to call nations into the unity of God's kingdom. Though the Tower of Babel belongs to ancient history, its lessons echo powerfully into the modern age. Humanity no longer builds towers of sun-baked bricks, yet the spirit of Babel continues to shape our ambitions. Every generation faces the temptation to make a name for itself, to build structures of pride that aim to reach heaven without God. These towers may not always be physical, but they rise in the realms of technology, politics, economics, and culture. Modern society has achieved remarkable unity through communication and innovation. The digital age allows people across the globe to speak instantly, to share ideas in real time, and to collaborate as if there were no barriers of distance or language. In many ways, the world has regained a kind of one voice, but the question remains, what are we doing with this voice? Are we using it to honor God, or are we building new towers of independence and pride? Technology, while a gift, can also become a monument to self-sufficiency. Humanity now reaches into the heavens through spacecraft, satellites, and global networks. Knowledge expands rapidly, achievements multiply, and the belief grows stronger that we are in control of our destiny. Yet beneath the surface, the same spirit that once drove the builders of Babel whispers again. The desire to make a name for ourselves, to secure permanence without dependence on God. Globalization mirrors the unity of Shinar in new ways. Nations are tied together through trade, communication, and shared challenges. There is great potential in this interconnectedness, but also great danger. When unity is pursued apart from God, it risks repeating the mistakes of Babel. Collective strength without humility becomes arrogance. Ambition without divine direction becomes rebellion. The tools have changed, but the heart of humanity remains the same. We see towers of pride rising in the form of empires of wealth and systems of power. Companies, governments, and movements seek not only progress, but dominance. The language of ambition is heard across every field, promising that humanity can achieve greatness on its own terms. Just as the people of Shinar sought permanence through bricks, the modern world seeks permanence through technology, influence, and control. Yet, like the ancient tower, these structures cannot endure if they are not grounded in God. The Tower of Babel warns us against mistaking progress for permanence. Achievements, no matter how impressive, cannot replace the foundation of faith. Humanity may rise high, but without humility, the fall is inevitable. The scattering of Shinar serves as a reminder that God will not allow pride to go unchecked, no matter how advanced the tools or how united the effort. Still, the story does not call us to fear progress or to reject unity. Instead, it calls us to align both with God's purpose. Unity can be beautiful when rooted in truth. Technology can serve the good of humanity when guided by wisdom. Progress can honor God when it is pursued with humility. The danger lies not in the tools themselves, but in the heart that wields them. Are we building for His kingdom, or are we building towers for ourselves? The unfinished tower in Shinar speaks to every modern tower we attempt to raise. It warns us that no human ambition will succeed apart from God. It challenges us to examine the motives behind our progress, to ask whether our unity is guided by humility or driven by pride. The towers of today may look different, but their fate will be the same as Babel's if they are built in defiance of the Creator. The Tower of Babel once rose with promise, a vision of permanence, a monument of human unity and pride. Yet what remains of it is not glory, but ruin, not triumph, but memory. Its stones lie silent, its ambition unfulfilled. Babel is remembered not for the greatness it sought to achieve, but for the futility it revealed. Human pride can build high walls, but it cannot stand against the will of God. In contrast, the kingdom of God stands eternal. Unlike Babel, it is not built with bricks or mortar, nor is it founded on human ambition. It is established by divine promise and sustained by divine power. Babel crumbled before it was complete, but the kingdom of God endures without end. Babel was scattered by confusion, but the kingdom of God is gathered by truth. The two stand as opposites, one a symbol of human arrogance, the other a symbol of divine faithfulness. The ruins of Babel remind us of the temporary nature of all human kingdoms. Empires rise and fall, civilizations flourish and fade, monuments are erected and abandoned. The great works of mankind, no matter how impressive, are fragile. They bear the marks of time, the weakness of mortality, and the limits of human strength. Babel's ruins speak the truth that nothing built apart from God will last. The eternal kingdom, by contrast, shines with permanence. It is not threatened by time, nor diminished by opposition. It is a city not made with hands, a dwelling prepared by God Himself. Where Babel sought to reach heaven with bricks, the eternal kingdom descends from heaven as a gift. It is the New Jerusalem, the city of God, where His people will dwell with Him forever. The contrast between Babel and the eternal kingdom is also a contrast between pride and humility. Babel rose out of the desire to exalt human names. The eternal kingdom is filled with those who humble themselves before the name of God. Babel was abandoned in chaos. The eternal kingdom is filled with peace and harmony, where every tribe and tongue is united not in rebellion but in worship. The ruins of Babel testify to what happens when humanity seeks greatness apart from God. The glory of the eternal kingdom testifies to what happens when humanity surrenders to God. The story of Babel warns us not to place our trust in monuments of pride, but to lift our eyes toward the city whose foundations are eternal. Babel reminds us of failure. God's kingdom reminds us of hope. One day the voices scattered at Babel will be gathered again, not in defiance, but in unity under Christ. The confusion of tongues will give way to a chorus of praise as every nation, language, and people join together to glorify the King of Kings. What Babel fractured, God will restore. What Babel abandoned, God will fulfill. The eternal kingdom will stand where Babel fell, not as the work of man, but as the gift of God. Babel's ruins fade into history, but the eternal kingdom shines into eternity. It is the promise that pride may crumble, but faith endures. It is the assurance that though human towers fall, God's city remains unshaken. Where Babel sought to rise and failed, the eternal kingdom descends and triumphs. This is the hope that calls to every heart, the invitation to leave behind the ruins of pride and enter into the city that never falls. The story of the Tower of Babel is more than an ancient account. It is a mirror for every generation, a reminder of the dangers of pride, the fragility of human achievement, and the hope of God's eternal kingdom. Babel teaches us that unity without God leads only to ruin, but it also points us forward to the promise of true unity under Christ. The ruins of Babel remind us that human towers collapse, but the eternal kingdom stands forever. If this message has spoken to you, I invite you to support this channel so that more people can hear these truths. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with those you love. Leave a comment to share your reflections or questions, and join the conversation with others who are seeking wisdom and encouragement. By subscribing and sharing, you help spread the message further, bringing light and hope to those who need it.